Good morning. It's really good to be back home at First Pres. First, I want to say thank you for your faithful partnership in our work with RUF, Reformed University Fellowship. Because of you, RUF has grown to be on over 200 campuses across the globe. That includes the 163 campuses that I have responsibility to oversee here in the States. And in these weeks, really beginning this week and moving forward, thousands of college students across the country are going to be moving back to campus or starting off their college journey, including a couple of my own. And on any given week in RUFs across the country, there are 30,000 students at any given week that are in a small group Bible study, meeting one-to-one with one of our staff people, or in a large group where they're getting to hear God's word brought to bear in their lives. So thank you for your investment to be a part of reaching and equipping college students for a lifetime of loving Jesus. It really does bear good fruit and make a significant difference. With kind of necessary thanks established, I want to invite you to turn in a copy of the Bible to Psalm 31. We're going to look at a single verse, but kind of work some of the larger context to get an understanding of what it means. And hopefully from looking at this verse, what we're going to start to be empowered a little bit to this morning is some capacity to rejoice in God's steadfast love, even in the kind of circumstances where all that you can see is the hurt that surrounds you. I don't know if you are in those circumstances now. I know that all of us will find ourselves in them at some point. You know those kind of circumstances, right? That seem to envelop you. I thought about them earlier this summer when our family was on a little bit of a vacation to Lake Taneycomo in the southeastern part of Missouri. It's a tailwater lake, which may not mean anything to those of you probably that aren't fishermen, but a tailwater lake means that the water for this lake comes from a reservoir that is above it, and it comes from the bottom of that really deep lake, out through a hydroelectric dam, which means that the water in Lake Taneycomo is about 45 or 50 degrees year-round. And so it's really cold. Well, we decided we would take a kayaking float down this lake that's a little more like a river early in the morning and are on the water, and something interesting starts to happen when that 45-degree water is met with the warm summer Missouri air, is a dense fog starts to form. Like, I'm not talking like the kind of fog you see at a distance. I'm like the kind of fog that envelops you, where all you can see is it. And that what starts to happen when all you can see is it is you become a little disoriented because you know there's a world out there, you just can't see it. And then you hear the motor of a fishing boat driving somewhere in the fog, and you're in the kayak on the bottom, the low down. And so you grip the paddle, like that's going to really help somehow, right? And it's not so much a panic attack, but your chest starts to get a little tighter because you hear the world out there, you know it's coming, and you start to form a strategy like, what am I going to do if the motorboat is coming straight towards me? Is you can't see there because all you can see is the fog that you're in. Psalm 31 is written in the midst of circumstances that are like that fog. It comes in the midst of a fog full of suffering or of pain or of hurt, what David was going to call affliction. And it feels like it is closing in, like, those moments. You lose the job and every conversation reminds you of your failure. Or the diagnosis comes, and all of a sudden, all you see on your calendar are the appointment after appointment after appointment that walk you into all sorts of heartache. Or the betrayal hits, and all those things that used to be full of joy just feel like they fall flat. Because pain isn't just a circumstance. It becomes like a sort of lens through which you see all the rest of life. It narrows your vision until all you can see is the wound or the hurt or the fear. That feeling, that's Psalm 31. A psalm for the fog. But in the midst of the fog, something holy happens. In verse 7, that's our text this morning, this is what David, in the midst of the fog, starts to write. I will rejoice and be glad in your steadfast love, because you have seen my affliction. You have known the distress of my soul. David is remembering that he is not alone in the fog, and part of what is empowering joy in the midst of all sorts of hurt is that he has a deep sense that God sees him, that God knows him, and that God is holding him. Those are going to be the three things we walk through together this morning, and with the hope that it might empower us to a little bit of joy, is that God sees you, God knows you, and God is holding your circumstances, all with his steadfast love. God sees you with his steadfast love. Sees you with his steadfast, well, I think Austin wanted me to say, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay. God sees you, it's all right. God sees you with his steadfast love. David has this deep sense of God seeing of him. You saw it in the first part of our verse of, you have seen my affliction. He's not writing from the mountaintop, he's rather writing from the pit, probably hiding in a cave. That's usually where you find David writing these psalms, from one of the enemies that he'll describe. And what I love about this psalm is it's not polite. Psalm 31, it doesn't clean itself up. Like, it shows up to church with its mascara smudged and its heart in his hand, right? It's a psalm that meets you in the midst of the reality of the hard circumstances of our life. Not the kind of pain that you can compartmentalize or that you can just kind of push away, but it's the kind that, breaks your voice when you try to talk about it. Let's get a little sense of the circumstances David finds him in by looking here together at a few verses. David talks about rejoicing and being glad in his steadfast love. But the word here that refers to the distress that God has known in his soul is in Hebrew a word that means tightness. It's a kind of emotional confinement. It is like a constricting of the inner life. This is that feeling that you get in your chest when it is too small to hold the hard things that you're in. You ever feel like that? Like you can get out of bed, but there are chains dragging you back the whole day? Or you try to pray, and it's like, it's just static. Or you're surrounded by people and feel utterly alone. This is the chest-tightening distress. David talks about, in verse 10 of our psalm, that when he begins to pray for God to be gracious to him, this is what he says. Well, let me find verse 10 here. Oh, I didn't? Okay. We're good. I got it. I'll just read it for us. David says this in verse 10, "For my life is spent with sorrow, and my, not moment, not hours, not days or months, my years with sighing. My strength fails," he says, "because of my iniquity, and my bones waste away." What he's saying here, like, this is the kind of sorrow that has gotten into his very body. This is someone who is unraveling. He's not even saying, look, it's all their fault. He said, my iniquity, like, I have some responsibility here too. It's the grief and the guilt have gotten into his very bones. And then in verse 11, he says, "Because of all my adversaries, I have become a reproach." That is, all my adversaries, all my enemies have disregarded me, thought me a nothing. But not just my adversaries, especially to my neighbors, I have become an object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. Like, they see him and they're like, run away. He is utterly alone. Loneliness has filled his lungs, and shame has made its home in his imagination. And then in verse 12, he says, I have been forgotten. You ever been forgotten? Forgotten like one who is dead. I have become a broken vessel. Like he's saying, I feel like a shattered piece of a pitcher that has lost all its utility and its purpose, And what you do with that shattered piece of a pitcher is you throw it onto the heap of trash and forget all about it. This is a cry of a man who feels utterly unseen and all alone. Because that's what pain does, doesn't it? It distorts your lens onto reality, and so that it doesn't just hurt, it starts to isolate. It starts to confuse. It showers you with these messages that you are unseen and all alone, because very often that is what our experience is of suffering so. I don't know what chronic suffering you've walked through, but my wife and our family and I have had to walk through some differing degrees of suffering. And there's a pattern that we notice that happens is in the initial onset of circumstances, people genuinely and sincerely care. And they will ask questions about what's going on and meet you with a degree of compassion and helpfulness. But when those moments stretch into weeks and into months and into years, and the circumstances haven't changed, or maybe they've just gotten worse, something interesting starts to happen, is people stop asking. Part of why they stop asking is because they realize they can't do anything to help, and it's overwhelming to them. And then you do something interesting. You stop telling. Because you have enough of those awkward moments where someone's like, how's it going? And you risk some honesty, and you can see them get overwhelmed by what's overwhelming you. And now you're in this awkward dance of like, well, do I have to care for you? I'm the one that you asked about. And so you say, I'm fine. It's all fine. Fed up, insecure, neurotic, and exhausted. We're all fine. Suffering isolates. But then you'll meet somebody, we call these people members of the club. What is people who have circumstances that are similar to whatever you're going, and you know enough about that you do risk and tell the honest story, and then what they meet you with is not a sense of overwhelming, but sometimes a little bit of one-upmanship. Oh, well, let me tell you my story. And there's this like perverse comfort in it, because what happens is you feel seen. You get it. You see my affliction. Look, what David is saying in this psalm, what is bringing to his heart a measure of joy, that he rejoices in God's steadfast love because he has seen my affliction. His unflinching, always seeing love. Part of the message of Psalm 31 is, look, someone actually does see. And he doesn't distance himself. He doesn't pull back. He's not overwhelmed. He pulls up a chair, pours a drink, and says, tell me all about it. I see your affliction. And what David does is he's not venting in a journal in Psalm 31. He's not talking to an acquaintance. He is praying. It's not a complaint. It's a biblical category of lament. That is pouring out your heart before God as you wrestle with him about the sense of injustice and sorrow and pain and brokenness in your life and in this world. And in his steadfast love, God sees. He sees the pain people stop asking about. He sees the tears you wiped away before you walked in this morning, or that you wish you actually had the freedom to cry. He sees the nights that you have begged him to make it stop. And he doesn't flinch. He draws near. Not to fix you on the spot, not to shame you into being better, but to be with you. It's the most used presupposition in the Bible. It's God's favorite. I am with you. Pouring out your heart to the God who is with you and who sees your affliction is the first step towards healing. But I think David is going to a deeper place in the midst of his wrestling with God in Psalm 31, is because he talks not just about steadfast love that sees, but steadfast love that knows. You have seen my affliction. You have known the distress of my soul. In Hebrew, the word seen is more than just visual recognition. It means to be regarded with care. Like, you look and see people generally. You walk into a room full of children and you see children, but if you see your child or your grandchild, right, you regard that person that you see with different set of care. There is an affection that is in your heart that you have set on this person that shapes how you see them. David is saying, look, the Lord looks, and when he sees, he regards with care. This is intimate, not informational knowledge. This is relational, not statistical awareness. These are not just a knowledge of your circumstances. This is what David's saying. God knows what it is like to be you in the midst of your circumstances. He understands your particular experience, the weight of sorrow or grief, the agony of pain or suffering that you bear. God doesn't just see what happens to you, he sees you. He knows not just the facts, he knows how it feels. That tight-chested distress, that hurting place of pain or shame or sadness or guilt or loneliness or hopelessness, he doesn't just know what that's like, he also knows all the ways we've tried to make it better on our own. The ways we have tried to numb it away, or the ways that we have persevered in like beautiful faith in the midst of hard things, or all the places that we have raged in unbelief in the sleepless long nights. Like, he knows all of it. Look, it is helpful, genuinely, to be loved by people. Like in a kind of generic, even to be loved by a stranger, right? The kind, encouraging word, the gift of generosity, those things are genuinely helpful and meaningful, but they often can be superficial because they're kindnesses from people that might not know you. But the opposite is really horrifying. That is, if someone really knows you, like I'm talking like knows the secret places, and they look at you and they go, I'm done loving you. That's horrifying. But what if you put those two together? Someone who genuinely knows you to the core and who uncommittedly loves you. That's empowering. Isn't it like what we spend most of our lives somehow trying to achieve? Like what we ache for? To be known and to be loved? I love how Tim Keller puts it when he says, to be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved, well, that is a lot like being loved by God. I think David is rejoicing in the midst of the fog of difficult circumstances because he is empowered by this knowing, steadfast love of God. I keep using this phrase, steadfast love of God, because it's what David does. It comes from a Hebrew word which means is hesed. It's covenant love. It's the way the Old Testament talks about God's loyal love is sometimes the definition you'll get. That is his love that knows you to the core and doesn't distance itself but moves towards. But my favorite definition of hesed that I've ever found comes from a little children's Bible, the Jesus Storybook Bible. And this is the way Sally Lloyd-Jones defines it, is that God loves you with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. A never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. This is not like Hallmark sentiment love. This is rugged love. This is love that finds you at rock bottom and says, I'm not going anywhere. This is love that doesn't wait in the car when you say, you should just wait in the car, but it's like, no, I'm coming with. I'm riding along with you. This is love that stays when everyone else walks out. This is love that has scars on its hands. This is steadfast love. And what that sort of steadfast love does is it starts in the midst of the difficult circumstances of affliction and distress to bring this empowering calm. Have you ever seen a child in a moment of distress, they fall down, scrape their knee, hurt themselves somehow, and a parent starts to move towards them? Now, one of two things happens. As the parent gets down next to the child, and if they see like the blood wandering from the womb and they're overwhelmed by it, they start freaking out. They're like, oh no, it's blood, right? Is then all you have is like this bundle of two people that are like a ball of anxiety, right? They feed off of each other. But if a parent gets down and with their words and with their body and with their focus and their attention, they communicate something like this. I'm here. I see you. I know what's going on. I can handle this. Something interesting starts to happen. Is the frantic child starts to calm. Because it doesn't just come from a reassuring presence, but part of what interpersonal neurobiology will tell you now is that there are these mirror neurons that fire in the brain of the child in response to what's happening to the parent. Is that in their brain and in their body, there starts to be this co-regulation, this calm that is brought in the midst of this relationship because of the seeing and the comforting and the calm presence of the parent. David is being co-regulated by God the Father in the midst of all of his hurt and his affliction. Because God comes with his steadfast love, that never stopping, always and forever love, and says, I see you. I know. I can handle it. And David, in the midst of this, is able to rejoice. I love what one author says, is that pain alone is doubled. Pain shared with another is cut in half. It's just heart math. It's the way it works. Where it is that you are in the midst of pain, God is inviting you. He already knows to pour your heart out to him. I love this old little story or parable about a man who was walking along and he fell into a pit. And he's in this pit and he's crying out for help, and then along comes a doctor and hears him crying out and says, well, what happened? Well, I fell into this pit. And the doctor's like, that sounds painful. Here's a prescription, and throws the prescription into the pit and keeps on walking. And then along comes a lawyer, and the lawyer's like, well, what happened? I fell in the pit. And the lawyer's like, well, we're going to find out who owns this and hold them accountable for their property negligence. Here's my card, and throws his card in and kind of walks on to write up the lawsuit. Unless the doctors and lawyers feel like I'm picking on you. Next, along comes a pastor, right? And the pastor's like, what happened? And the man tells him he fell in the pit, and the pastor says, well, what you really should do is call it to God. Here's a prayer for you to pray, and throws the prayer into the pit and keeps on walking. And then along comes a friend. And the friend says, well, what happened? Well, I fell into the pit. And the next thing the guy knows, the friend has jumped into the pit with him. He's like, well, what are you doing here? Now we're both stuck. And the friend's like, don't worry. I've been here before, and I know the way out. Brothers and sisters, the God who would call you his friend has jumped into the pit of human suffering and brokenness, and in his resurrection has made a way out. And his message to you is, don't worry, I've been here before, and I know the way out. And I am with you. At the heart of the Christian story is a God who, when he was incarnate, was known as the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. A God who walked into the tomb, and a God who prayed with bloody sweat. A God who knows what it is like to scream, my God, why have you forsaken me? So that you can see not just your wounds, but the one who was wounded for you. So that we can see not just the pain, but the presence of love that entered pain. So that we can call, maybe not with a triumphant shout, but with a trembling voice and tear-streaked whispers of defiant grace, I will rejoice and be glad in your steadfast love. God's steadfast love sees you, it knows you. And the last thing I want us to think about is how it holds us. It holds us in the midst of waiting. See, most of this psalm is in the first person. It's David recounting his own experience, right? I rejoice in your steadfast love. But something interesting happens if you read it all the way through is you get to the last verse and David changes tenses. Is what you find in verse 24 is that David moves from talking in the first person to now he's talking to you, the whole congregation. And this is what he says in verse 24. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord. Be strong, let your heart take courage, all you who wait. In the fog of hurt, even when he is seen and known, the truth is there is waiting. Most of the Christian life is lived in the gap between promise and fulfillment. It's lived in the place where waiting is what we often are called to. One author puts it this way, is that the most asked question in the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelation is how long, though, Lord? How long? And the most repeated command from God is do not fear or do not be afraid. The people of God consistently cry out for relief, and the God of love bids us to trust him. Back in verse 5 of this psalm, David began his request that God would incline his ear towards him and be his rock and his refuge. And he says a pretty interesting phrase. He says, "Into your hand I commit my spirit, because you have redeemed me." Like, that's a bold thing to do in the midst of like overwhelming circumstances. He's saying, I trust you. But what he says there is, into your hands I commit my spirit, because you have, past tense, redeemed me. David has one foot in the past, and he's saying, because of my past experience with you, O God, I, in the present mess of horrible circumstances, commit my spirit to you. I entrust my future to you. So this faith rooted in the past, expressed in the present difficulty, looking towards the future with trust. Look, David is weaving this past, present, future reality into this expression of trust as he anticipates his future. And he does it in a way that brings joy, because he looks and anticipates in that future that the goodness of God is going to be displayed to him. In verse 19, he has this beautiful phrase where he prays, "Oh, how abundant is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you." We're staying at my folks' house, and you got to be careful staying there, because if you randomly open any closet in the house, pretty much, you are likely to be surprised by Christmas presents. I realize it's only August, but this is a year-round phenomenon for my parents of looking for presents that they buy for their grandchildren or children and store up in abundant goodness throughout the year. Why? Because their heart are generous towards the people that they love. And they're anticipating this day in which they will shower us with their abundant goodness. Look, in a small way, it is a reflection of the generous heart of God, who right now is storing up abundant gifts of goodness for his people. But I realize that you can be in hard circumstances and you hear me or someone say something like that and you're like, yeah, that just sounds too good to be true. Or do you think, well, that's great, but it's not right now? Is that most of our life is lived in the midst of waiting. But Christian, as we come to a close, I want to give to you an assurance that we have a far greater reason to be confident in the abundant goodness of God that is waiting for us than even David did. Because this psalm isn't just about David. It's about Jesus. This isn't just a psalm that David prayed in a cave. This is a psalm that Jesus prayed on a cross. From the cross, in the darkness of distress, Jesus cried out, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He's quoting Psalm 31. But he's not just quoting Psalm 31, he's living Psalm 31. When he was betrayed by friends, when he's surrounded by enemies, when he had been treated like a broken vessel and thrown under the trash heap of humanity, when he had been forgotten by those who loved him, he is knowing the deepest of distress, the enduring of hell upon the cross, gasping for air on a Roman cross. He prays the words of David, living it for his people. Look, all the ways that we have tried to manage our hurt and independence from God, the way that we have said to our achievement or to our bank account or to our reputation or to our family, "You are my refuge. You are my strong tower. You are my shield against the hurt in the world." When we had given God's place to all those things, those are the very things that Jesus is enduring the distress of the cross to pay for. So that he becomes not just David's story, but ours. And he doesn't get delivered from suffering. He delivers us through it. He's not rescued because he was rescuing you. And he experiences the silence of God so that you and I can hear the voice of God through his word. Say, "I see you. I know you. I love you." Do you know what that means? When those little voices come, you know the ones that say, nobody knows what it is like to be me. There are outstretched arms with the scars of nails that says, I do. When the voices come and say, they don't really love you, they're all going to leave you. His comes and says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Behold, I'm with you even to the end of the age. And when the voice comes and it says, well, you've messed up too big this time. It's too far gone. It's too big of a mistake. His says, I already paid for that. I'm not ashamed of you. I was covered in shame for you. You're mine. He went into the darkness to find you. He took the nails to redeem you. And he has risen from the grave to restore you. As you wait for his steadfast love, you are held with his nail-scarred hands. Look, Psalm 31, it does not promise an end to your trouble for sure, but it does promise strength to meet it. With prayers of trust that you are not alone, you are not forgotten, that Jesus has come to be with you in the midst of all the hard. Something interesting can happen. As I think those things become like heat on a summer day. When we were kayaking on that lake this summer, as the day began to warm up, something interesting would happen, which is all the fog started to burn away. And then you could see the lush surrounding countryside of the lake, and you could see the wildlife that was all around you, and what was once kind of foreign and only out there but unseen started to come alive and full of color and life. Is that the heat burned the fog away. Brothers and sisters, the heat of God's love has the power to burn the fog away. So that when all you see is your hurt, you might begin to see the reality that you are seen, that you are known, and that you are held. And because of that, you are actually able to be strong and courageous. All you who wait for the Lord. Let's pray. Father, I pray, I don't know the circumstances that are in this room, but you do. You see everyone here, and you know in intimate detail the challenging things that are in their past or in their present, or that might be a part of our futures. Would you enable us to believe what seems too good to be true, that you actually see us and that you know us and that you hold us all with your steadfast love. Help us to wait for you with strength and courage, we pray. Amen.